Hello, I'm Toycat, and the European Union just awarded Ukraine and Moldova candidate status. This is of course a big deal for Ukraine and Moldova, but it's also a big deal for Georgia because at the same time, according to their president on Twitter, they've officially been confirmed to be having a European perspective. Supposedly this means that once they tie up a few issues, they'll be able to become EU candidates themselves as well. Again, once they've just got the outstanding priorities addressed, whatever that means. And so this is a big deal because the EU is officially getting the expansion train going again, right? It reminds you of what you would have been like if you were in the 1800s, seeing the US slowly form from a few states to slowly taking over an entire continent and becoming, like this continent-sized superpower. It looks like that's what the EU is still on course to do. It's weird because just in my lifetime alone, they've doubled in membership, and it looked as though they were slowing down because of the last few years, but this is very much them signaling the opposite. However, what does it mean to award candidate status? It seems like it must be a big deal if Ukrainians are real excited to hear about it, right? And everyone's like, woo, they're candidates. However, the actual explanation, I feel like this graph is a simple explanation of what has happened, but the actual explanation of what a candidate is best done by this Politico article. What does membership candidate status mean? It's the first official step on the road to EU membership, but that road can be long and arduous, and there's no guarantee that a candidate will ultimately be accepted into the club. In fact, not only getting the status can be tricky by itself because you have to have every EU member government which have to act unanimously, all 28 have to agree, and also candidate status doesn't automatically mean a start to accession negotiations. It just means that they can now officially start negotiations with what does joining the EU look like. And so there's a lot of immediate thoughts about this. One is like, wait, so how does Russia feel about this? And funnily enough, according to this, Russia's Russia's reaction is that the Kremlin says that, yeah, we already knew this was on the cards. This is no big deal. Vladimir Putin even says they have nothing against Ukraine's possible membership of the European Union. It's their sovereign decision to join economic unions or not. Again, this is kind of like, it's what you would say. I mean, officially, they only have issue of Ukraine joining NATO because Ukraine has now gone from being an EU applicant country and a NATO aspirant country to being an EU candidate and a NATO aspirant still. They're not in either of those unions, but it's NATO that Russia supposedly has an issue with. Sure, join all the economic unions you like, as long as they're economic unions, hey? Which I'm sure is the line of questioning that will come up if this goes any more serious. Because here's the real scoop. Even though they're a candidate country, alongside Albania, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Turkey, the only two countries in that batch which are really going hard on the negotiations is that Montenegro and Serbia, which have been candidates for 10 and 8 years respectively, neither one of them is really getting closer. They both keep setting deadlines and dates and saying, yeah, we'll definitely do it by 2020, 2022, 2025, and I do believe it will happen at some point, but the fact that 10 years in, they're still saying, yeah, we don't really know for sure, is probably a good sign to let you know that it takes a while to join. In fact, the first candidate status was for North Macedonia, then known as something else for, we've discussed that on this channel as the fun story of how they changed their name, and that was in 2005, so 17 years later, they still aren't really that close to joining the EU, partially because Bulgaria Bulgaria has a big dispute with them, which they're not gonna they're not gonna let them join the EU until they solve that dispute, and so, long story short, it can take a really long time. In fact, how long does it take? According to this, the time between membership application and joining the EU, again, not becoming a candidate, membership application and joining the EU is quite a long time. I mean, in the case of Finland and Sweden, which were arguably the most integrated already, they were basically, it was 2.5 and 3.5 years. If we talk about countries that are beyond that, right? We got 5.5, 5.6, all the way up to 13.8 years for Cyprus. It takes a really long time, especially for the Eastern expansion part of the EU, to officially join the Union, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One is the politics of, growing the economic union, which is, at some point, posed to become its own nation state in its own right. Like, who do you add and why, and how do you make sure they're properly integrated? If they're going to have to join the currency and the free movement zone and share a labor market and all these various responsibilities, it's a big deal to think about. But it's also a big deal because officially there's a ton of criteria to follow. So By the way, so officially here are the criteria you need to join the EU. It's called the Copenhagen criteria, and all it is you just need to have democracy, rule of law, human rights, respect for and protection of minorities, the existence of a functioning market economy, as well as to cope with competitive and market forces in the Union. That's all you officially need to do to join the EU, and it's funny because even that, right, a lot of members which have joined the EU, that at least some of them you could argue, like, get close to pushing the line on some of these things. Joining the EU is easy because you just have to say you're going to follow those things, but actually joining the EU means that once you're in, it's very hard to be kicked out. There's very few, the mechanisms for a country leaving voluntarily were hard enough. I don't know why Greenland's not shaded in grey here, by the way. But yeah, getting a country out voluntarily was hard enough. Now, trying to get a country out non-voluntarily, probably not a thing they can do. So even though there are strict, by the way, these are pretty strict rules, right? Like, have a functioning market economy, wow, so hard. But what's much actually harder is there are very specific criteria to join. You need to have price stability. Your inflation must not be more than 1.5% above the best performing free member states. You can't have excessive government deficit or debts. Your long-term interest rate must not be too high. There's no bottom limit, it seems, but you can't have too high of an interest rate. And also, your currency has to be convertible to the euro for at least 2 years without devaluing. This means that effectively you're joining the euro 2 years before joining the euro. But these are the 4 things you have to do to join the European Union. To be a real part of their economy and join the bloc and have all these fun benefits, you need to make sure you're meeting the responsibilities of it. And so these criteria are very strict and they apply them very firmly to new joining members. I mean, besides Greece. But to new joining members, but if you look at members now, according to Eurostat, this is the EU's own site, this is their official take, is like, so the limit is 60%. That is the absolute, that's the threshold above which you have gone above the limit, and only Estonia, Luxembourg, Bulgaria, Sweden, only small countries are following that, with Poland being the fun exception. Good job, Polish. But everyone else, as you can see, has gone some amount above that, and in the case of 200% debt to GDP. Come on, guys, you can do better than that. But also, even Italy is pretty high, Portugal, Spain, France. When Germany is above the financial threshold limit, you know that it effectively means nothing. And so if that's true for this, in fact, I have no doubt that there are a few countries which are going way above the average inflation amount. I have no doubt that there are some countries which, would be having higher interest rates if they had control of their own interest rates. Obviously, they have a shared currency, so they don't. Would be having devaluation if they had their own currencies. Again, they're in a shared eurozone, so they kind of don't. And it's just kind of crazy. By the way, just as a fun thing, here is a map of debt to GDP ratio by country. It's a few years old, as best I can tell, but the 60% threshold is like, it's not, it's funny. All the countries that are outside of whatever. It seems as though there's a lot of countries which are going quite high on debt to GDP, which is no issue for anyone whatsoever. Don't look up Japan's debt to GDP if you want to keep yourself going good. But as you can see, a lot of countries go quite below, including Russia. And it's funny. A lot of countries which are in that international markets not being friendly to them, they can't borrow so much money. I wonder if that's a part of where their issues stem from. Speaking of issues, I think it is worth mentioning that, so Ukraine and Moldova and even Georgia joining is actually one of these logical things to throw on the table now. I actually think this is because again, the EU has an issue of the only real safe spot for expansion besides EFTA countries, because Norway, Iceland, Switzerland and Liechtenstein are not, they're not really EU members, but they sort of are, and they could one day expand. They could obviously add those later if those countries get on side. However, the only real safe spot for them was all of the Balkans. I was going to say Baltics, but I know that's not right. The former Yugoslav countries, besides Slovenia, are not in the EU right now. That's basically all of them, with the extra exception being Albania. And so this is their key point for expansion, because Turkey's being Turkey, and every other country in Europe has this whole Russia really doesn't like when we become friends of them, because they see it as an imperialist expansion of our union onto their borders. However, what's Russia going to do to the EU if they say we're going to give Ukraine candidate status now? What's Russia going to do? Are you going to write a strongly worded letter? Are you going to invade someone? Ooh, looks like you've already done that, huh? But yeah, the other interesting thing here is, like, actually, the Balkans are frustrated with this because they say, like, yeah, it's been 17 years and, you know, it's not going well for us. Like, the truth is the EU maybe should be focusing more on the countries where they're safe, or maybe they're seeing now as, like, okay, we're going to start all these applications. Every country in Europe, with maybe Belarus and Russia being the two easy exceptions for a very long time, let's get them at least to the negotiation table, and that way they can do the expansion on their own timetable, which is what this really is. You know, Ukraine would love to join right now. However, a lot of different EU countries would not like them to join right now. You know, even the EU themselves might be on board with it. Ukraine might be on board with it. But famously, I think Macron is the biggest example of, like, let's see if we can find it real quick. Simple as that. A lot of EU countries are deeply skeptical about enlargement and have looked ways to slow down the moves towards adding new members. They've insisted the EU can't seriously contemplate adding more countries till they've overhauled the unwieldy decision-making already creaking under the weight of 27 member states. In fact, such skeptics included the Netherlands, Denmark, and France. And just, yeah, long story short, EU countries are saying, yeah, if we're going to add a lot of countries, which especially smaller countries, having this every country has a veto system gets a little bit silly. I mean, the population of Moldova having an equal veto to the population of Romania, having which is also equal to the veto for France or Germany, does seem more and more insane when you get to smaller and smaller countries, which, if we're being honest, besides Ukraine, is where we're at now. Georgia, Moldova, all of the Yugoslavs, Balkans maybe is probably the more correct term there. They all are smaller countries, and can you give them equal fair vetoes? And the answer is, who knows? You know, this is a similar thing if we go back to everyone's favorite US map. This is a similar thing the US had to work out. When there's 13 states, yeah, just every state has to unanimously agree on something. I think that's how the Constitution worked back then. Again, I'm talking about something I have no clue about. Want to talk about U.S. politics? I hear nothing's happening this week in that. But yeah, I believe that now the Constitution is based on 2/3 majority, right? And then every state then has to pass it through their own house, regardless of whether they're one in the 2/3 or not, because that's how the Constitution works. Am I wrong? Am I right? I don't know. But there are things that have moved that way. The US used to just say, yeah, you guys pick in the same way the EU does right now. They just told the state, you can pick your representative to our government. The Senate, which is equal based on states, I believe they could just pick however they wanted, and then after a certain amount of time, or maybe it's just by de facto, but now they're all voted for because it should be democratic. Maybe, you know, maybe those countries should follow the Copenhagen criteria. And so yeah, it's really interesting to see that the EU. Every step, it sounds like it's almost like a conspiracy theory, but it is the goal. The goal is to slowly solidify as some form of country, and the goal, it's honestly, it makes sense. When you look at the world economy, you look at the big players, it's the US, it's China, and then every European country, like individually, you know, they've got some big influence, but as a collective, they become a third prong to the superpower factor, right? At least by economy. Side note, I always think it's funny that, like, Russia has a smaller economy than Italy. Their economy is only double as big as Switzerland, who has, like, what is it, like 40 times less people? Man, it must be crazy to be Russia over there and being like, well, yeah, we got like double of Switzerland going on here. Anyway, so yeah, I've also got this fun graph showing the EU versus the US in a variety of factors, including also how old? Oh, 1980. Oh yeah, I was like, what is the US's population? Side note, I'm just saying, the US and the EU have grown like pretty decently since 1980, huh? More so the US than the EU. Same with a lot of things, if we're being honest. Speaking of a lot of things, was the GDP per capita in China really $195 in 1980? See, that's insane too. The growth of China in our lifetimes is going crazy. The growth of the US is slowing down, and so is the third prong the EU could say isn't the smart thing to do now. To lock this down, make it good. Maybe that's what they should do. Maybe it's not. All I know is every time something like this happens, it's fascinating because anything, at this point they are a more fragile union. They are more susceptible to anything. This just one last thing, just because it's interesting. I want to get off my mind. Right now, interest rates are going crazy up. Can we find that in today's big stories? We got the PM not undergoing psychological transformation. We got something I can't read. And then we've got something about a man charged of terrorism after Norway shooting. We don't have guns in Europe. Everyone knows there are no shootings in Europe because there aren't guns. It's widely known. So, You know, clearly not real news. Let's see. Look at that. Those are facts right there. So let's see if we can get some. Okay, wait, no. Why is no one talking about interest rates? Why are we talking about other things right now? Don't they know about the fiscal? Okay, so anyway, interest rates are rising like crazy right now. Across most of the world. The US is at like 1.5, 1.75%. The UK is hitting a percentage roughly, and the EU as a whole is still at negative 0.25. They're trying to raise them, but they're not doing so good there. And yeah, so that issue, the whole last 2 years of the pandemic, you know, things are pretty wild right now, huh? And the only thing I have to say before I end this video about, you know, good job. Oh, what the heck's this? Anyway, good job, Ukraine and Moldova. Good job, Georgia. I'm excited for you. I didn't realize they had a lady president. You know, the balance of the gender balance in world leaders is always interesting to me, and it's interesting that it's gone so far the other way recently. But good job for getting a European perspective for your country. You know, it's not as good as Ukraine and Moldova, though, is it? So you could be doing a better job as president of Georgia. I don't know what I'm saying here. Anyway, so one last thing is here is my map of countries I've visited. Still can't really update it. There's still a lot of travel restrictions, but I went on a road trip in the US since last time, and so that means I can now tick off Oklahoma, Kansas, Wyoming, and Idaho. And boy, am I excited to do this. So Oklahoma is all the way. I feel like I might have officially passed the halfway point on the states, right? What do we reckon? Then there's Idaho over here. And then we got, I want to say Wyoming. It's very, very hard to find in a list. And then finally, what's the other one? I'll have to look at the map. It's Kansas. I went to Kansas recently. It was lovely. Okay, so as you can see, the map has gone a little bit greener. I think this, as soon as travel things are better and I can actually do this, South Africa and Argentina have to be like go-tos. Because, you know what? Looking at these two countries, I need to get at least some more continent coverage. Also, East Asia got really low coverage. Like, need to go to South Korea, get some Vietnam in there. But still, I've got a 25% rate now of world coverage, and that's fun. Actually, by area, I bet it's larger. It's kind of cheating to have Russia count as one big blob, but still, it's fun. You know, I'd argue it's cheating to have Germany not count as one big blob. But you know what else I'd argue? I'd argue that Lisa likes. This is for a bad map video, and I forgot to include it in there. But this is the way you remember all of the lakes inside of the US. I hope you find it fun. I accidentally clicked on this now, and now you get to look at it. It's a very useful mnemonic device, I find. And I hope that you enjoyed that just as much as I hope Ukraine and Moldova are enjoying their new EU candidate status. And if we like really race through this, we might see Ukraine and Moldova as EU members by the year 2040. If we like get pen to paper, everyone like rushes, appreciates the importance of this, we might really be there in just 15 to 20 working years. Anyway, thank you for watching. Second channel. Oh wait, do you like videos like this? Do you want to give me money? I've got a Patreon which I use to fund my kebab habit, and yeah, they won't improve the quality in this channel at all. Goodbye. Second channel. Don't care. But for real this time.